Motherhood on ice. More and more women are interested in freezing their eggs, prioritizing a career over childbearing. But what are the risks? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Richelle Carey. It's a sign of the times. With more and more women prioritizing education and a career over having children, interest in fertility treatments has skyrocketed. In the UK, egg freezing is by far the most popular. Demand for the treatment has increased by 400% in just the last year. But for many, costs remain too high. Before we get into today's discussion, Al Jazeera's Neve Barker set things up from London.
Melanie Jackson's among a growing number of British women delaying motherhood until later years. Prolonged education, careers and simply finding the right partner all have an inevitable part to play. As Melanie approached 40, she decided to freeze her eggs to preserve her fertility.
Things were just getting later and later, and I wasn't living a particularly settled lifestyle, but I thought I didn't want to grow old without having a child or children.
Despite conceiving her daughter Safi naturally, Melanie continues to keep some of her eggs frozen for future use.
That time that you think is going to last forever, and suddenly you realise you're too old to sort certain things out, it just helps prolong that a bit and it's like an insurance in a way.
Egg freezing's been around for decades, mainly to help patients undergoing harmful cancer treatment. But now private fertility clinics are promoting their services to young professional women.
Freezing your eggs at an earlier stage when you are setting out on a career will set your mind at rest for later on, once you have achieved everything you wish to in the workplace, to actually achieve a pregnancy later on.
The procedure involves giving patients expensive hormones to stimulate egg production. The eggs are removed and stored in liquid nitrogen for up to 10 years. When a woman wants to have a baby, the egg is carefully thawed, fertilised and transferred to the body as an embryo, a process that can cost more than $18,000.
In the last year, the number of inquiries into private fertility treatment has more than doubled, with egg freezing now topping the list of popular forms of fertility treatment. In the last 12 months alone, clinics like this have seen a 407% increase in people interested in freezing their eggs. The figure's more than double that in Spain. Most women, around 40%, are between the ages of 25 and 34, and the number of women even younger is on the rise.
But despite soaring interest, the success rate remains unclear. One of the leading pioneers of fertility treatment has a stark message for women thinking about egg freezing.
Don't do it. There's a lot of evidence to suggest it's very unreliable, it may be very unsuccessful, and there may be a considerable pregnancy loss. And in the long term, of course, we may be creating babies that might be at risk for diseases that we didn't expect.
Some experts believe it's too early to know the full effects of egg freezing. But as the science of fertility develops, it could help more women make difficult decisions between work and family life. Neve Barker, Al Jazeera, London.
For more on this, I'm joined by our guest from Brussels, Dominic Stoop, Medical Director at the Center for Reproductive Medicine at UZ Brussel, a university in the Belgian capital. And in London, Josephine Quintavalle, Director of Corethics, an organization which focuses on ethical dilemmas of human reproduction issues. And thank you both for joining me. Dominic, I want to start with you. From your experience, why this surge recently in the number of women seeking this procedure?
First of all, more and more women are aware that their procedure exists. So egg freeze, and as I said, exists for a long time, but it's only been really efficient for the last couple of years. And now they hear from each other that exists, and that's why they get interested in doing it themselves.
Who, in your opinion, is the ideal candidate for something like this? Or is there one?
The typical candidate in our clinic is a 35, 38-year-old who is single or is in a relationship which is actually too young to start off with kids. So basically, these are women who actually have a desire for children at the moment, but because of the fact they're single, they're unable to start with their family. So, in the contrary to what is often said, they're not often the career women who actually put their career first, actually women who have desire now but are unable because of the lack of a partner.
But even the women that choose to do egg freezing can take it a step further and do IVF and still be a single parent if they choose to, correct?
That's correct, but there's a clear distinction between those women who actually go for the, like, donor sperm insemination, because they made up for themselves that they want to be a single mother, and those who decide to freeze oocytes because they still hope to have the traditional family with a partner, but they're still looking for that partner, and they hope one day when they meet that Mr. Right that they can actually start a family without too much of a problem related to fertility.
What is involved in the procedure?
In our center, all candidates are seen by psychologists, so we want to be sure that those women are really well aware of what they're about to do. And then they also screened in terms of their hormone levels to see whether they still have enough ovarian reserve to undergo such a stimulation. The treatment itself exists out of injections, daily injections during a 10-12 day period, followed by an egg retrieval. So this is a simple procedure, takes like half an hour, where the follicles are aspirated, and so we have the oocytes, and then we freeze them. So the whole procedure itself, for one cycle, it takes about 2 weeks.
Okay. Ms. Quintavalle, I understand you have concerns about procedures like this. Top of mind, what is the most pressing concern you have about egg freezing?
Well, I'm concerned about where women are going. Professional women, for the most part, are getting involved in this. And I think they're doing a great disservice to a lot of feminist battles that have gone over the centuries. We should be looking to re-educating them about when they're most likely to get fertile and encouraging a work environment and a social environment that allows them to get on with meeting Mr. Right and reproducing naturally. I think we're grossly underestimating the risks that are associated with this procedure. It all sounds terribly easy, just pop your eggs in the freezer. But one of the first cases that I got involved in, and when I got my head around what was involved with this process of harvesting eggs, was involving a young woman who actually died from the procedure of taking her eggs. And I think we're absolutely underestimating the risks that are involved, and we've got to change society so that young professional women can get out there and find their partners and get married and reproduce in the natural way. I think there's another issue here too, which it's not just those women who are putting their eggs in the freezer, but there's also a market in frozen eggs, and a very unseemly a market across Europe where young women from poor countries are being asked to sell their eggs, to donate, they say in inverted commas, but hardly donation, to donate their eggs so that they can be used by some of these professional women who've not been able to find a partner and get on with it earlier.
Okay, you said a mouthful there, Ms. Quintavalle, so let's kind of go step by step. I think that few people would disagree with your point that the goal is to create a society where women feel that they could step away from the workforce and have children and then return back to the workforce with there being little time lost in their career. But until society actually gets there, is there any harm in women having this option? And also, not necessarily because it's about a partner, is there anything wrong with a single woman having this option?
Well, I do think that nature provides a male and a female to create a baby, and I think that's a very good example for us to set off from. Also, as I say, frequently here you're looking at our young professional women who are going to try and get eggs from somebody else, because one of the things that I think if you did stop women in the street and ask them how long do you think a woman's fertile for, they wouldn't have any idea at all about how women's fertility peaks. It peaks in mid-30s, and any IVF specialist would tell you that that's an absolute truth. And so you need to understand that as you get into your mid-30s, your fertility rates are starting to decline. So I think we do need to, first of all, educate these women that it's not a quick fix at the IVF clinic, but you do need to know about your own biology. And I think what we're doing at the moment is trying to distort biology. And I think the other issue that hasn't been dealt with adequately is there are serious risks involved. Normally in medicine, you don't give drugs to healthy people. In order to stimulate ovaries to produce more eggs than they normally produce, and frequently you overstimulate, and the more healthy the woman is, in actual fact, the more likely she is to have reactions to these drugs, which is why younger women who get involved in egg donation programs often suffer immensely. And I've even had the experience of knowing somebody who died as a result of egg donation.
Okay, I'm going to let Mr. Stoop
respond. Which was the harvesting process.
I'm going to take a moment to have Mr. Stoop. That's okay to have Mr. Stoop respond to some of what you said. So, Dominic, she said that she feels that this procedure distorts biology. Does it distort biology? Does it augment biology? What's your response to that?
Yes, if we're talking about distortion of biology, then actually everything we do in medicine in general is distorting biology. Actually, treating cancer is also something which is there in nature, and also nobody is bothering to do that. But there are some points I would like also to answer to. First of all, the reference to egg donation. There are ethical issues with egg donation, but I think that those women who freeze their oocytes actually will decrease the chance that they will need egg donation in the future. So they themselves undergo the procedure for stimulation and egg retrieval instead of another young, healthy woman who needs to undergo and take the risks. I think that actually egg donation exists.
No, well, let's talk about the risks. That's also something that Josephine said, is that this is a risky procedure. Yes. How risky is it?
I disagree that this is a risky procedure. Often people read about the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome,
which can be serious,
which can be lethal, and it's a complication of traditional in vitro fertilization. But nowadays there are modified stimulation protocols, especially designed for women who want to freeze their oocytes, which are OHHS free, so they are free of the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation. So basically it can be avoided if the right stimulation protocol is used, which unfortunately is still a big misunderstanding.
When you say misunderstanding, are you saying that there are a lot of medical professionals that don't know how to do that properly? No, at least patients who read about it on the internet, for instance, they think that this is a risk, but if they're well informed, they will learn that it's no longer a real risk in stimulation, as long as there's no embryo transfer, as long as there's no chance of a pregnancy after the treatment, which is the case in those women who undergo freezing, or also those women who undergo egg donation. Okay, and we'll actually get to embryos in just a moment, but in the meantime, Josephine is dying to get in here. So, Josephine, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I went across a number of IVF clinics before I came here today to talk about this, and you'll find that every single one of them, including the Human Fertilization Embryology Authority, do warn you of the risks of egg harvesting. It's up there for anybody to read. And I think it's interesting the way this is being presented as a medical treatment. A woman who hasn't found Mr. Right is not suffering from any medical condition. We do need to underline that. So she's given drugs to stimulate her that are normally given to women who are undergoing infertility treatment. So you're getting a healthy woman and you're exposing her to these drugs. And in medicine, we know that if you're healthy, you're sometimes likely to have greater reaction to drugs that you don't need. So I think to underestimate the risks that are involved is not exactly where medicine is on this.
Josephine, are you opposed to IVF?
I'm personally, I've no problems about saying that I come from a Catholic tradition and we have reservations, but more than that, I would define myself as very much a pro-life person. I think you know, primarily my concern is about the destruction of human life when the embryo is created. In this instance, the embryo is not created, we're talking about eggs. I would like to see fertility treatment for women which is user-friendly and ethical if there are real fertility issues, but I really do dispute the fact that women who've got older and haven't found Mr. Right are actually suffering from a medical condition. And that's why I go back to, let us change society so that the professional career is not always there as a you know, a carrot that you can't resist, so that women are allowed to take time off to conceive naturally and to have children when it's easiest to do. And that's definitely, you know, I don't think any medical expert biologist would deny this. That's before 35. Not that it doesn't happen naturally afterwards, but it becomes singularly more difficult, and the female of the human species is remarkably infertile. You know, we don't produce loads of eggs, which is an interesting point too. We certainly don't produce 10 or 12 eggs in a cycle, which is what often happens as a result of stimulation. Yeah.
Dominic, what is the success rate?
The success rate is very much dependent on the age at which the woman decides to undergo the procedure, and also depending on the number of oocytes she can accumulate potentially over multiple cycles. Most of the experience with regard to the success rate is based on the results from oocyte donation with the frozen oocytes. And there we see that women under 35 have a 6% chance per oocyte that the oocyte becomes a child, which sounds very low, but if you accumulate 10 to 20, 30 eggs, it gives you a good chance.
Is there a
must be
candidate
said that women above?
Is there a patient that you would tell? Is there a patient that would come into your center and you would tell her she is not the right candidate for this? Would you turn someone down?
I would definitely do so, but what I see in the clinic the last couple of years is that the women who come are very well informed. 80% is single. The rest is mostly just in a very early relationship. So I definitely understand that they freeze their oocytes. And actually, I see it as preventive medicine. So these women, they know that they want a child in the future, and they know that the chance that they would need IVF in the future is extremely high. So what they basically do, they make life easier for them in the future.
Okay, let me present something to both of you, because Josephine, you mentioned earlier that you thought that this was somehow being framed improperly in the feminist world. So I want to read you something from Lord Robert Winston, who's a fertility specialist, and he appears on the BBC often. And he says that egg freezing is a confidence trick that allows greedy private fertility clinics to prey on the hopes of anxious, desperate women. But Dr. Gillian Lockwood, who is a fertility specialist in the UK, responds to that by saying, I do believe egg freezing is a feminist issue. It was the same reaction when the pill was introduced. We were told it would destroy the family as we know it. The fact is, there will always be some men out there who hate the idea of women having the same biological freedoms they have. Dominic, I see you nodding there.
Yes, I fully agree with that. When the pill was introduced, people were talking about medical and non-medical reasons for the use of the pill. That's exactly what's happening at the moment. We're talking about medical freezing and the so-called non-medical freezing, which is then for the career women. Nowadays, everybody, or at least most, actually accept that they don't distinguish medical and non-medical use of contraceptive pill. And I think in the future the same will happen with the egg freezing. Another thing with regard to the abuse.
No, go ahead, continue.
Yes, the thing about the commercial IVF centers who may actually a certain way abuse women by actually making them freeze their oocytes. I think this is an important issue, and we should be careful that these things do not happen. I work at an academic center, and we have psychological counseling for all our candidates. I do think it's really important that these women are very well informed about the chances sense for them, and the advantages and disadvantages of egg freezing. And the psychological aspect is really important.
Okay, Dominic,
they should not think that it will guarantee a future child.
I want to interrupt you just a moment because I want Josephine to have a chance to respond to that.
Yeah. Yes.
Would you like to sort of redress the question? I mean, to begin with, I'm surprised to find... I'm surprised to find myself totally in agreement with Professor Winston, who I do know quite well. I think he's got it right. But I think there's an issue here that we're not addressing, which I think is also about social class. I think you'll find that the majority of women who get involved, probably because they've got the money to fund it, but those who get involved in egg freezing, leaving aside issues of genuine medical conditions, etc., are likely to be professional women. And this is where I go back to my original statement that from a feminist perspective, we shouldn't adapt our biology to our careers. Our careers should adapt to our biology.
Okay.
And we should inform young professional women, get on with it and make sure that it doesn't interfere with your career.
Okay, I want to introduce
whether you're in law, whether you're in medicine or whatever,
Absolutely.
You should have the same opportunities to go forward and not be in any way handicapped or underprivileged by your biology.
All right, I want to introduce another angle into this because it's not just eggs that can be frozen. Women and couples can also freeze their embryos, but that has led to the potentially tricky problem of who they belong to. Hollywood actress Sofia Vergara is fighting a legal battle with her ex-partner Nick Loeb over who owns the fertilized eggs they froze a few years back. The actress now wants them destroyed. Her ex-partner wants to keep them. So, Dominic, my question to you, do women or couples who choose to do this need to seek legal advice because of how complicated it can get?
Yeah, of course, it's very much depending on the country where you live and the local laws. But it is very true that cryopreservation, so the freezing of embryos, is ethically much more complex than the freezing of oocytes. And of course, depending on the country you live in, you need to inform yourself very well what will happen if there's disagreement between the couple. But I think in most centers there's a contract signed by both of the partners prior to starting the IVF treatment, and if there's disagreement, basically what's in the contract and signed before is what will happen to the embryos over time.
Josephine?
I mean, this is without even getting onto the other issue of surrogacy and so on and so forth. I mean, I think the question that I would ask is, should we ever freeze embryos in the first place? The natural place for a human embryo is in the womb from conception onwards, and that's where, I proudly confessed before that I come from a Catholic background. I think there's quite a lot of wisdom in this. We should be looking at infertility and ways to help people who have infertility problems, dietary issues. We all know that smoking and alcohol are all kinds of contributing factors that affect fertility. But I think, the question here is nobody knows what to do with surplus embryos. There are millions and millions of surplus of frozen embryos that nobody knows what to do with. Some of them have probably been in freezers for years and years and years, decades. And you do have to ask, should we ever have frozen the human embryo? And should they be abandoned and unclaimed in IVF clinics around the world?
Well,
I think it's a much more difficult issue than the freezing of eggs, quite frankly.
Okay, my final question then is, companies like Apple and Facebook are actually now offering to cover these procedures for their employees. I guess my final question to you, Dominic, as you've seen how this trend has changed over the years, do you think it's going to become more mainstream?
Yes, I'm quite convinced it's going to be more mainstream, and if these companies reimburse it to their employees, basically it makes it cheaper for them and more affordable. Of course, we need to be sure that the employer is not forcing their women actually to freeze and actually therefore postponing their motherhood, because that would be a bad thing. Because for that, I agree, women should have their kids at a younger age and would still have good fertility chances. But I think if women are single and they have no other alternative. I think it's a good thing that they can freeze their oocytes at a low cost.
All right. Thank you to both of my guests for this discussion today. I think it's timely and it was a very engaging discussion. Appreciate it. Thank you to Dominic Stoop and Josephine Quintavalle, and thank you for watching. As always, we like to hear your thoughts, so you can contact us on our program page, aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Richelle Carey, and the entire team here, goodbye for now.